This is an Audio Wool original.
Frightday. I'm your host, Byron, broadcasting live from our fortified little compound in the woods of Montana. And tonight, we begin an investigation into a murdered Kennedy, but not the one we covered in episodes 105 through 108. Of course, that situation was straightforward, with the shooter universally accepted. But will his brother Robert's case be as open and shut? That's what we're determining. It's the assassination of RFK. In this week's edition of Kelly's Cryptids and Kennedys, I'm joined tonight by Kelly.
Oh, hi. Hi.
And Sam can't make it because he's training to be a horse jockey?
He is.
Okay.
It'll make sense, Byron, I
All
promise.
Right. I trust you. Yeah. Oh, I guess I should do this. This is exciting stuff in a second. Never mind. Pardon me.
Wait, are you jumping the gun on my stuff, or do you have exciting stuff to share with me?
Jumping the gun. Interesting. No, it's a live program. I just was going to let people know that they can give us a call and let us know what they think, because...
Are we taking live calls?
Call 1-833-374-4489 now to share your paranormal encounters and real-life nightmares, or to talk horror with the hosts.
Or to talk conspiracy with Kelly as well. So consider that as this series continues. But most importantly, this weekend, folks, live.frightday.com. Sunday, October 6th, 8 p.m. MST through the witching hour, which I believe is 3 a.m., right?
I mean, I think it is. Is it 2 to 3 or is it 3 to 4?
3 to 4. I'm not really sure. And
I used to think it was midnight.
Does it depend on like EST?
Oh yeah, or what about daylight savings?
Exactly. When do the witches
When does daylight
come
savings
out?
start?
But yeah, we're going to be doing our first ever live streamed paranormal investigation. It's at the Dumas Brothel, or Dumas.
I've been corrected like 400 times by Sam's family.
Well, yeah,
and Sam.
They're from Butte, and it makes sense. But yeah, for fans of the early 2000s, Kelly and I are going to be strapped up MTV Fear style with body-mounted cameras. Yeah, and angles are going to be controlled by our good friend and producer Dennis, and you listening, watching.
I thought you were making me.
Nope. Just pointing at the cameras.
I was going to control it.
You're like at least 3 feet. You're not going to be able to do it. But yeah, by chatting and telling us who you want to hear, what you want to see, because there's going to be a camera on the front of me. There's going to be Kelly's camera, and then there's a static camera.
That's where you can watch me have a heart attack and die.
I don't think you're going to have a heart attack.
I'm real frightened.
Well, it's going to be a fun time. We've got about 7 hours of investigation time to do, and it could go longer depending on the activity that we see and sense. But live.frightday.com, make sure to click follow now, because that's how you'll be notified of when we go live.
Yeah.
And if you miss it, of course, we're going to probably have it for replay at patreon.com for society members. But you want to be there live.
I mean, yeah. In all seriousness, I'm really nervous because, like, Sam was going to be there with me, and now Sam can't be there with me.
Yeah.
There's at least a chance that he takes pity on me when I get really scared. There's basically zero chance that Byron takes pity on me when I get really scared. So I'm gonna have to bring. My daughter suggested I bring Bun Buns.
And who is Bun Buns?
Bun Buns.
You brought Bun Buns tonight.
Yeah, Bun Buns wanted to test things out.
Right,
that's Puck Wedgie's solution to the situation.
Pink bunny. My sister had a light pink bunny like that.
I don't understand. It's very interesting because my daughters have like 150,000 stuffed animals.
Sure.
But they're very attached to every single one of them, and they all have names. And tonight,
names.
Bun Buns was very interested
I
in
had
coming.
one. That's it.
I mean, that is a lot more sane and
Yeah,
rational.
And I don't know where.
All of those out there who are thinking of becoming parents or new parents,
Sure.
just limit everything. Everything.
This is exciting.
It is.
This is a report that you've been thinking about your entire life.
I have been thinking about my entire life.
I feel like we briefly talked about this situation in our MK Ultra series, and of course we had
did.
a pretty in-depth JFK series.
Very in depth. And then, the Maryland is a connection.
Uh-huh.
I also feel like this was an assassination I knew a lot less about. I feel like we hear way more. I mean, I know JFK was a president and RFK wasn't yet. But I have to say, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but you guys, Sam's been along for a lot of my research.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two different types of stories that I research in Captain Kelly's compound with Sam. Type A
Okay.
is when Kelly falls down the rabbit hole and Sam hides somewhere else in the house so he doesn't have to listen to any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then type B is when Sam kind of like nonchalantly comes in and hangs out and pretends that he's not interested until he can't fake it anymore and like he's actually super into it. He's really into this one, you guys. Very into it. I've got him fully down the rabbit hole.
Well, let's get into it.
Kelly's Cryptids and Kennedy's.
Who's gonna be the next president of the United States?
Wow. Well, Byron, we're going to start our story tonight. You can hear in that clip a lot of enthusiasm for this man. And we're going to start out on a warm California Saturday in early June of 1968. Bobby Kennedy, he was in a grueling push. It was 3 days before the California Democratic primary election. And he was meeting with citizens and attending fundraisers from San Francisco.
Fundraiser?
Fun.
Now we're talking.
And fund.
Okay.
Mostly fun.
Well, they're Kennedys. That's what they do.
Yeah. It really struck me watching a lot of this footage. I know it's all politics, right? And I'm so used to being incredibly callous and skeptical of everything when it comes to politicians. But there were a lot of stops he made on this political push, especially in those last 3 days before the primary. Places where previous political candidates probably didn't bother to spend much time.
Like the beach.
No. Like a lot of time in Watts, a lot of time at community colleges, a lot of time with labor unions, and not just the super powerful ones, but ones that didn't get as much play or publicity or have as much clout. And I'm sure that there was strategy behind all of it, but boy, oh boy, you sit in the politics of today long enough and it's pretty easy to romanticize these clips when you start seeing back that first week in June of 1968. So, I mean, I actually went into the presidential library and was looking through the notes about his itinerary for these days. I don't even understand how a person could do it, but I think he was feeling really pushed.
Like what, 3 stops a day?
Like 15, 20 stops a day.
Oh.
It was absolutely insane. And like so far that he would start in San Francisco, have a breakfast with one group, do a parade, go do some meeting with a community group, then get on a helicopter and come to LA, and then do 3 more events there, and then do a fundraiser in San Diego that night, and then be back in Sacramento for the next. I mean, it was just nonstop. But on this particular afternoon, Byron, he took a short break from this overt campaigning, at least, to take a little stroll down Huntington Beach. Shaking hands by the thousands. In a little over 72 hours, the primary would be over, and he knew it was really important because he had just come from Oregon,
Don't say it like that.
I know, but I bet he did.
He probably did. A lot of people who don't know how to say it like
I
that.
feel like a lot of people in the 60s said it that way too. Wasn't it a
Sure.
time thing?
I mean, maybe it's a mid-Atlantic accent thing.
Could be. I mean,
Yeah.
his. I know there's a Boston accent, and I get that that's partially the Kennedys, but they've got some other weird things going on.
Sure.
Anyhow, he had lost there, and California was pretty much a requirement if he was going to have a shot at actually winning the Democratic nomination. So he was pretty nervous. 72 hours from that knowledge, whether he had made it or not, he knew that this might be the last little breath of fresh air he got before truly these final 2 days, 2.5, 3 days became the determining factor for his campaign. This was a pretty rapid fire campaign to begin with because originally he said he wasn't going to run. And
Is this his first time running?
it was.
Wow.
It was. And you see, he had decided it was worth vying for the White House, a lot because he had pretty serious conflict with the current Democrat that was occupying the White House. And this was a gentleman who stepped into the empty house once it was vacated by his brother's assassination. And this man also had beef with Kennedy. These two guys were pretty famous nemesis. In fact, Lyndon B. Johnson,
Of course.
who apparently has really weird rumors about him that I started, well, we'll get into that later, but 15 days after Kennedy announced he was going to run against the, incumbent president, they were both Democrats, right? LBJ announced he wasn't going to seek re-election.
Did he have a reason?
I mean, a lot of what was going on right now came down at least optically to the Vietnam War. Kennedy was very opposed to it. McCarthy, not to be confused with the other McCarthy, but McCarthy, governor from Minnesota, was also running on the Democratic ticket and, not the Democratic ticket, but for the Democratic nomination. And he was very anti-war. And so Bobby stepped in as another anti-war candidate, and LBJ was catching a lot of flack because he clearly had not gotten us out of Vietnam yet. If you'll recall from our Kennedy series, the older brother Kennedy, JFK was on the cusp, in theory, of pulling
close.
us.
Yeah.
And that was almost 5 years prior to this. And we were still in the thick of it. It was very ugly. 68 was a pretty rough year. So here Bobby is on the beach in Huntington. One of the groups that he encountered that afternoon was the Methodist Youth Fellowship group from nearby Whittier, California. A tall, confident brunette, just a couple weeks ahead of finishing her junior year of high school, who is the daughter of a strong supporter of this newest offering from Camelot. As fate would have it, 15 years to the day after she had sat in her living room watching Bobby announce his presidency in March of that year, 15 years to the day later, she would give birth to a truly unique human, Byron.
Oh, no.
As fate would have it, that human would one day comb through evidence ranging from primary sources all the way to a fancy, odd little website called Bibliotheca Pleiades
Sure.
to uncover the events of the days she was living at that very moment.
We were at the part of the beach that's very close to one of the oldest Jack-in-the-Boxes in the country. I believe it's still there on Pacific Coast Highway.
2 tacos for a
right
dog.
across from the beach. And of course it was a great
burgers
cheap
then.
place to get burgers. And so my friends and I from our church group were there at the Jack-in-the-Box getting some of those awful burgers, and we noticed
they
a
weren't
crowd
awful.
gathering
Probably
and moving toward the beach and then moving across the sand. And as we walked back to the beach, we noted that the crowd was large enough it must have been somebody really important, and suddenly we realized that it was RFK. And he was, of course, he's a man that's small in stature, but he seemed like he was somewhat at home there on the beach, though we know everybody stumbles walking in deep sand, and
I don't.
he was barefoot, though he was still dressed in his dress pants and I believe a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, as I can remember. And he had quite an entourage of not only his helpers, but people who were very interested in just being in his aura as he walked across the beach and mixed and mingled with the people there at Huntington Beach. I can't actually truly remember if I actually shook hands with him or I know I was
Did your
close
mom
enough
kiss him?
to see the features
think she
in his
might have made
face,
out
and
with
I
him, and she's
remember
just not telling
the
me.
wrinkly, crinkly around his eyes, and he seemed like he was really a good guy. Seemed sincere and very unassuming and pretty gracious. I was impressed with him. Of course, I was 17 years old at the time and didn't probably know much about how to judge character. It was very impressive, but then, of course, the experience turned into a more horrific experience.
So, for those of you who couldn't figure that out, but that was Captain Kelly's mother.
And for some reason, you guys just can't turn off the TV in the background while you're recording a conversation?
Yeah, I don't. You know how we've talked about this before? I don't even register noise in the background for me.
Yeah.
I think she's probably even more extreme
Similar.
on that realm. I am noticing similarities with each passing year, but it's funny because my parents were fairly conservative when I was growing up. But
That
I
church
know
group. I didn't know.
yeah, certainly was not my path in life, though her parents were, I think at least for a while, Democrats. My parents were pretty conservative growing up. Took me a long time to get her back to the realm of Bobby's home party. It took me about 50 years after that Bobby incident, so I don't know. I would like to think that she did shake his hand, but it is a little creepy to imagine that when he left the beach that day, certainly he had no way of knowing this, but he had less than 100 hours to live, Byron.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Indeed. I feel a little sad
Yeah, it's sad.
doing
Terribly.
that.
Well,
It is terribly sad. And one of the questions that helped me frame this discussion tonight, because my children are lovely with this point, why does all of this matter, Mom? Lots of people die. And that is true. We all know how much the world changed when JFK was assassinated. I feel like it's really common for people of that generation, especially, to talk about, I know where I was when this happened.
I was like the first where I was when it happened. Other than when World War II ended or something.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe there's always a where was I when that happened.
I guess ours was 9/11.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I've not previously understood the major significance of RFK being assassinated. Now, obviously, it's a horrible tragedy, and it happened the same year. As I said, Vietnam was raging. Opposition to it was rising. MLK had been assassinated only
That's
a few
one of
months
them,
before. It was a really, really ugly year. And later this year, I guess taking things into the context, the historical context of what happened after RFK's assassination helped me put into place, at least personally, why I think it matters so much. Come November, do you know who won the presidency in November?
Of 1968?
Yeah. It was Milhouse.
No, see, yeah, wouldn't have been able to tell you that.
Yeah, so Richard Nixon won the election, and although nothing is ever this simple,
Yeah.
in my mind, as I have pondered this throughout the research, it's not terribly difficult to trace that point in American history straight to where we find ourselves today. Feels like a pretty significant change that we haven't necessarily turned around from. I'm also probably being a Debbie Downer because the election's in a month.
Sure, yeah, we're a couple weeks away.
Yeah. No matter what way you paint it, this was a really ugly, horrific event. For those of you who don't know, on the evening/early morning hours, so June 3rd was the day before the election. June 4th was the primary election. Tuesday in Los Angeles. That night, he showed up at the Ambassador Hotel once it was clear that he had enough votes to secure that Democratic nomination for the state of California, and gave a speech, turned to head out the ballroom, but it was so packed that his staff turned him the other direction. He made his way through the pantry of the hotel, at which case gunshots were heard, and not only Kennedy, but a number of other people were hit in that kitchen pantry space.
Is anyone killed?
Yes, in fact, Robert Kennedy was killed.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's good. I mean, yeah.
No. It is a good question. But he was about 12:15, so technically on the 5th of June when
so
he was shot.
this was the day that he found out. I mean,
he found out he had won the Democratic primary for California, gave his acceptance, walked off stage. He was with his wife. His wife was just a few steps behind him. My favorite thing about his speech is he talked about his adorable dog, Freckles.
Freckles.
Talked about people maligning his dog.
I mean, what kind of dog was it, though?
Some kind of a cute mutt thing.
Oh, okay.
Like I don't know, seemed to be maybe some collie in it, maybe some spaniel, maybe some retriever. I don't know. He was cute. At least in the black and white pictures, he was cute.
Yeah.
But he went down, and about a day after that, so a little after 1 a.m. on the 6th, so yeah, a little over 24 hours later, he did succumb to those injuries.
Nothing good happens after midnight, guys. Go home.
It's true.
Don't stay late. The party's not worth it.
It's very true.
Go
we were
home.
just talking about how partying, it's just not worth the cost,
No. We're squares.
Yep, definitely squares.
Staying alive, though.
Well, for now, I don't know. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
So, Byron, do you know who ostensibly was the one that killed RFK on that night?
Would that be the person who is the header of my Twitter profile, Sirhan?
Oh, it is Sirhan Bashara Sirhan?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one.
It's interesting, though, because for some reason we never hear that middle name. It's just the double first and last. Sam studied Arabic in college, and I tried to get him to explain to me, like, the naming mechanisms.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to. He failed me.
See, look at this lovely picture that I've used as my header for a very long time.
Oh, have you? Poor Sirhan, just
Yeah.
looking distraught as all can be.
Yeah, it was, I think it was a still that
Spoiler alert, I'm saying poor Sirhan because I don't think he did it.
Oh, interesting.
Spoiler.
Spoiler alert. You guys can tune out now. Don't need to listen
I
to
guess
the
we
rest
can
of this
probably
report.
just be done mostly. You heard my mom give her talk, and my upshot is that Sirhan was not responsible. But even in more concrete ways than you might imagine.
Yeah, the still is from a documentary, real quick, called The Killing of America.
Ooh.
From 1981. It's a Japanese-American documentary.
That's a dramatic title right there.
Well, it's full of some really heinous moments in American history. The assassination of JFK, RFK, as well as a bunch of
Hopefully MLK.
school shootings. Explores sex killers, serial killers, things like that from the 70s. But it's a really interesting perspective because not many people were doing documentaries like that back then.
Very interesting. I'd love to know more about the guy who did that. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Byron, before we get rolling, I do have a little, I don't even think it's a disclaimer. I just have something that I really want to say up front, both because I want you to hold me accountable to it.
Okay.
And because I want you to think about this before you chime in. Oh, by the way, we can't say peanut gallery.
Peanut gallery.
Like chime in from the peanut gallery.
You're allergic or?
Well, no, it's not about me. We do a word of the day with my kiddos, and the other day they had asked something about peanut gallery, and I looked up the origin of it. It's wildly racist.
Well, I mean, I wasn't going to say it, so why did you bring it up?
Well, because I was going to say before you chime in from the peanut gallery, and then I stopped myself because I'm like, no, I can't say that anymore. It's horribly racist. For those of you who don't know, it's tied directly to when people of color were forced to sit in the balcony seats.
Yeah.
And some people say it was because they would throw peanuts down on the people below them, but in fact, more historical accuracy seems to point towards it being they would just The only thing that they were able to eat up there were peanuts. The shells would get thrown on the ground and nobody ever gave a shit to come up and clean it because the owners were only concerned about the white seats below.
Yikes.
So it just became filled with like a floor full of peanut shells. Anyhow,
The cheapest,
peanut gallery
worst
out.
parts of the theater.
Yeah.
We don't do that anymore.
No, out of the vocabulary. But before you chime in with comments from any other direction, not that one, but any other one, I want you to keep this in mind. As I've done research for this, and it's something that bugs me doing a lot of research, but it's really come into focus on this particular topic. It's really common, Byron, for people on both sides of an issue when they're trying to argue their point to hone in on one specific little detail and use that as like, well, it would only make sense if blank. Or this clearly doesn't work because of blank. The reality is any small focus is not going to tell the whole story. In this, for example, Byron, at some point you might hear, well, Sirhan wouldn't give his name during
After he was
the
caught.
arrest,
Yeah.
right? And that means he didn't do it because anybody who's going to kill a Kennedy wants to have their name known by everyone, right? Which is just insane because
That's not...
right, but you will hear a lot of times it's involving emotional things or things that could perhaps be part of the larger picture, but that certainly isn't evidence. That's no reason to jump to that conclusion. And so we, Byron, throughout this investigation need to challenge our assumptions. All right. You might also hear a woman wearing a polka dot dress was seen by a couple of witnesses and heard yelling, "We shot him." Well, this makes no sense because if she was part of a conspiracy, why would she yell that out? Again,
Good question.
if you narrow it to that little focus, of course it doesn't make any sense, but nothing makes sense in a snapshot, especially when it's part of a complex story, and us humans all live complex stories. So don't reduce it to a little thing. Everybody, Byron, you and I especially, need to put away our jump to conclusions, Matt, and we can get them back out at the end once I've put forth everything, I'd like you to consider before you make your decision. For now, ask questions, Byron. Push back if you see me making assumptions.
Okay.
Okay. And, do your very best not to make them yourself.
Because, of course, makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah, it really does.
Great.
Really does. How you feeling, Byron? You ready to get into some history now?
Yeah, this is an assassination that I am unfortunately blind to most of the details, and
I kind of was too, so that's good.
for the most part, I think Sirhan did it. So this is
I can't
this is gonna be a
wait.
great adventure.
Let me just one little nugget to get you going, Byron. You remember how long it took me to convince Sam that, because I did convince him
Eventually, and I don't know if he would be.
with JFK.
Do you think
I
he
bug
would-
him about it all the time. It's like
Okay.
the only win I have in our
I think his concession wasn't that. It was that it wasn't so straightforward or something like that.
well, it was
like,
that it definitely wasn't Oswald by himself.
by himself.
Like,
yeah.
he doesn't necessarily agree with my full-on conclusion, although,
You can go back to listen to episodes
Well,
105 through 108.
and Byron, somewhere in the midst of these series, I will be doing a behind-the-screens short update about some very relevant and very personal information I recently learned about the JFK assassination.
Your social security number?
No, I know that.
No, but are you going to share it?
I mean, sure. Can't be worth much at this point.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
But Byron, Sam it took me 2 days of like him listening to some of this stuff before he's like, oh.
Weird.
Like my parents were over for dinner the other night and he was talking to my dad about it and was like, no, this is like so much more obvious than JFK even. So prepare yourself.
Okay.
Let's talk about Bobby first. You know how many Kennedy kids there were, Byron? There were 9.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Bobby was 7. Mm-hmm. So that's a rough spot.
Is that younger than John, though?
Much, much younger.
We're talking like...
He was a bebe. So the difference between John and Bobby was the same as the difference between me and my sister who just got married recently.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Same spread.
Is that 3?
9.
Oh, the one that just got married.
Yep,
Yeah.
9 years.
Yep.
So I guess 8.5. Bobby didn't really compete directly with Jack. He was actually known by his father as the runt of the litter. You know, I mean, things were a bit more harsh back then. We weren't quite as concerned about people's feelings, but by lots of accounts, which we're not going to get into because there's just not nearly enough time, but by many accounts, Byron Kennedy household was in a super warm, fuzzy one.
Very competitive.
Very competitive, and especially competitive in vying for the affection or approval of that patriarch, Joseph. Joe, the father, wanted to be president himself. When that didn't work out, he wanted his firstborn son, Joe Jr., to be president. That also didn't work out because he died.
Saying, I want him to be the president.
And then he was like, okay, well, I'll settle for John then. All right. Bobby clearly was nowhere in the picture for this, but he was very, very close to his mother. And he was very religious. So they were a Catholic family.
Very Catholic family.
And
was it one of the first Catholic presidents?
It was the first Catholic president. Yeah, it was a really big deal.
I love that they try to say that he was the last, but Joe Biden is Catholic as well.
Oh, yeah, he is, isn't he?
Yeah, people always forget that.
See, I just don't even
You don't clock it because he's kind of rational in
well,
how
and it's
he
funny.
has like a personal opinion and then kind of leaves it aside, like with things like abortion.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know any super right-wing Catholics. I only know moderate Catholics, I guess. So the Catholics I know are some of like the most level-headed religious people that I'm friends with.
Interesting.
Like very, very balanced, and actually I would even say more, I don't know, whatever. Point is, yes, he was Catholic.
I agree. Kat in the chat, you got to have spares. You got to have extra kids back then.
Holy cow. I mean, it's terrifying. And I'll tell you what, Bobby took that to heart because he went forth to have 10. And then actually when he was killed, there was an 11th that his wife was 3 months pregnant with.
A bonus. Okay.
So there was an 11th that never met her father.
No,
Isn't that freaking sad?
Yeah.
Really, really sad. Apparently, Bobby wasn't much of an academic, which is funny to say because he attended Harvard.
Well, it's not. I don't. You've worked in college prep.
Yeah,
I mean, if
I
you
will
have
tell
enough
you.
money to buy a library.
Well, we do have a recent former president who went to Penn, and that's an Ivy that people like to talk about. So he was very religious, Bobby was, and this was one of the things that led him to his wife, Ethel. Fun scandal, though. He was actually dating Ethel's sister.
Oh, no.
Uh-huh. When he met Ethel and decided he liked that one better. And there's a lot of scandal surrounding whether Bobby also had an affair with Marilyn. All of his, he gets thrown in with that a lot, I have to say. I don't know much about him personally outside of, the very surface level biography research, but there wasn't nearly as much talk of infidelity in what I read about him as there was in what I read about John. Now, that's also quite a metric for comparison because there was pretty much rampant nonstop infidelity, at least discussed in the biography information when I was researching John. Who knows what Bobby was like, but the image at least was of a fairly devoted husband-father. Again, without using any of our assumptions or jump to conclusions, that does not mean that he really was a good father or a good husband. It also, even if he was, doesn't mean that he was a good politician. So let's stick to the facts, Byron. He served in World War II in the Navy, then came home, went to college, then went to University of Virginia Law School, graduated in 1951, and was trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life. Joe, this patriarch that was going to make sure all of his kids made a name for themselves, helped him get a gig, but ironically, it was not in a Democratic senator's office.
Interesting. Okay.
It was on Joseph McCarthy's Senate Committee on Un-American Activities. So Kennedy, there are photos.
So that McCarthy. We're talking
that
about
now we're talking about that McCarthy.
Blacklisting.
Yes. And so if you
actors in
look
Hollywood.
at some of the pictures of McCarthy in those Senate hearings, there's Bobby sitting behind him as kind of like a helper, essentially. He was a very young, yep, there we go. He was very young. He was fresh out of law school, and it was certainly a job that his father got him. But this is where we start to see nothing ever boils down to black and white, but there is a lot that, indicates he quit that job very quickly after 6 months. Could be a lot of reasons for that, but there is significant evidence pointing to him really struggling with the way that McCarthy was going about things. At this point, he had come back from the war, and then attended school, so he probably was on board with a certain amount of this anti-communism stuff and bought into the fear of we can't let that get to our shores. But later on, he would make, in fact, in just, basically 2 weeks before he declared his presidential campaign in 1968, he was on Meet the Press, I think, CBS.
Is that still a
Sunday
show
morning
back
Meet the
then?
Press?
Wow.
I think so, yeah.
All right.
It was a show like that. I think it might have been actually Meet the Press, though. And he made this comment about, do we have the right to be killing people to try and keep, communism might be 11,000 miles from our shore. Do we have the right to kill people to keep it from getting 10,000 miles from our shore? Is that really, I think we need to investigate that as a country if we have a right to do that.
Yeah, if someone has a different way of thinking, how dangerous is that?
Right, and, to protect it from when it's still not, yeah. So I think his opinions certainly shifted over the years, but even that early on, he had some reason to leave that job fairly quickly. And he became chief counsel for the Senate Rackets Committee. And this is where some conspiracy theorists might say Bobby met the beginning of his end.
It's just the mob.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, first it's the Teamsters Union. And this is one of those really fun, embarrassing things that I get to admit now that I'm okay to be humiliated since I don't have any shame left, Byron. Do you know what Teamsters are? Because I didn't.
I guess I don't know what the...
I mean, I knew the Teamsters Union was a huge union. I know this was Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah.
But embarrassingly, Byron, I did not realize that Teamsters were truck drivers.
Yeah.
I had no idea that that's what that meant.
They do freights.
So this was specifically the union of truck drivers. And, we can talk a lot about unions. The Teamsters Union was fairly notorious for being a little bit less reputable than some other unions. And most of us have heard of Jimmy Hoffa, at least in passing. There are some fabulous sound clips, which at some point maybe we can put into a Behind the Screams episode where we talk a little bit more about his head-to-head with some of the mafia and some of the Teamsters bosses, because they're started to be blending into the same thing there. Boy, oh boy, comments in the middle of hearings where, Hoffa or even one of the, it was either Hoffa or it was Sam Giancana, but one of them, he was asking questions in an actual Senate hearing. And
Did you call him a or something?
No, they were the guy was giggling.
Thing? Oh.
Okay. And Bobby says, whether it was Hoffa or Giancana, I can't remember, but says,
Sure.
I thought only little girls giggled like that.
Yikes. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time is probably equivalent to the mob. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, he wasn't afraid to piss these people off, and he was fairly, at least his public persona was fairly devout in allegiance with his moral principles. Again, who the hell knows what was happening behind closed doors, but he was very opposed to corruption and very willing to piss people off in his efforts to stop corruption. So, then, what we know him the best for is running his brother's presidential campaign in 1960, which, as we all know, was successful. And
could he have technically had him as a vice president?
yes.
You can do that?
Well, he could
Does it have
have.
to be from separate states, though? Or is that a new rule or an old rule?
I don't think they have to be from...
Huh.
Boy, now you're catching me off guard twice.
Sorry. No,
No. That's a
great.
great question. Will you look it up? Because
Well,
I'm not
course.
aware of that.
About
They have to be from
rules?
different states.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
a
Vice
president and vice
presidents
president have to be from different states.
I believe that's right. But
Oh my gosh,
I'll look into that.
I feel very silly that I don't know that. Wow. So He could have, but was not. And his father actually said, "Hey, Jack, you got to give your brother a job. He helped you in. Now you got to give him a job." Well, at this point, John, for all good reasons, Jack, really trusted Bobby and actually wanted him to be in the cabinet. So some people were very upset about this, but people are also upset when JFK chose LBJ as a running mate. LBJ was a very strategic running mate because, especially with some of the civil rights issues that were afoot, Kennedy was never going to win without buy-in from the southern states, and that's certainly what LBJ got him. However, LBJ and Bobby really disliked each other from the get-go. And there's one story I read that traces back to actually when JFK was running for president, and LBJ was somebody who was potentially going to oppose him. I didn't know this, but JFK had Addison's disease, which is an autoimmune thing. Apparently it was fairly under control, but LBJ was ready to make a huge deal of this. He found out about it and was going to basically try to make this a huge press issue to make people feel like, well, there's no way.
Well, it's a big, scary disease.
Right,
There's
it's a big,
no way
scary
he
disease,
can
and he'll never survive
be
if he gets
competent.
elected, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't. So he was going to use that to take down JFK. Somehow they stopped him, but Bobby never forgave him for that. And there are lots of other things that I'm sure piled on, but a couple places I've read that was kind of the source point of their beef.
This whole vice president.
Yeah, what's the
president-
situation? Is it?
It's just it's a little bit more complicated than that. The 12th Amendment apparently states that electors must vote for at least one candidate, either president or vice president, who is not from their own state. So it means that both candidates are from the same state. It could pose a problem for electors from that state.
But that one has been completely... Hasn't that one basically become null and void because this was when they were still electing presidents... And then the runner-up became vice president, or was what amendment switched
back
that?
then I don't remember what that was. Does that really matter?
Man, this is where I love being live, but man, I would love to take 5 minutes to look that up because that's going to drive me
well,
fucking
then keep
crazy.
talking, I'll do it.
Okay, please look that up because that really is going to drive me crazy. All right, so here comes Bobby, and his position shouldn't necessarily be chief advisor to his big brother, but that's exactly what it becomes. And as the attorney general, he became John's advisor on almost every issue. This especially played roles in really important crises such as the Cuban Missile Crisis, the civil rights issues that were afoot. And as Bobby got further and further on in his brother's presidency and in his role as the attorney general during his presidency, he became more and more bold, let's say, in his big middle finger to anybody he thought was doing harm to the general good. And again, yes, clearly I have a bias for this man. Clearly, as I've done this research, I've become incredibly like, oh my God, if only. Like, what the fuck? Why don't we have anybody? Don't get me wrong, I love Kamala.
Yeah.
But why don't we have anybody with this? Nobody can say things this completely moral and have traction at this point in life. It's very sad to me.
But what about Donald Trump?
Except for him.
Yeah.
Except for him.
It was the 12th Amendment as well. It was ratified in 1804.
So that was the one that said it's no longer first and second. You get a pair
Yeah.
that are running together.
Yep.
But they can't both be from the same state.
Because you have to vote for one person. You have to give your electoral votes to someone who's outside of the state as well. I don't know, dude. I don't fucking know.
We'll follow up on that part later. Okay. I was going to say, because I knew about
Honestly, I hate the Electoral College.
I know.
I don't think it needs to be around anymore.
I know. Well, the Electoral College is just a whole different fucking ball game. Anyhow. All right.
You okay?
Uh-huh.
Good job so far.
Yep. One of the big lines that Bobby took was sending troops and U.S. Marshals to protect the desegregation efforts in the South. One particular student, James Meredith, making sure he was able to attend University of Mississippi. In fact, I think Byron today might be the day that he enrolled as the first black student.
Really?
I actually think so.
October
Again,
1st?
like, I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
I think it was. We do on this day with the girls. I put 3 events of the day up on the fridge. And I feel like this was one. It was very early this morning and I was half asleep when I was doing it. But I think that it was either today or was looking at it for this week. But I think it might be October 1st. Anyhow, he worked really closely. Was it?
It's like second? I don't know. No, I was just searching. I have no idea. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But cool. Very great.
It was really cool. And Bobby was very active in making sure, I guess, to whatever degree we could, that he was protected. He also got very involved in this Cuban Missile Crisis, which, again, we could go on forever. What's that movie? There's a great movie about the Cuban Missile Crisis that won some Academy Awards, I don't know, a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago.
For Red October.
No, you fucking jackalope.
I have no idea.
All right, well.
13 Days.
Yep, that one.
By David Self.
That was a really good movie.
Never seen it.
And I have to say, anything I did know about that event prior to doing this research came from that movie.
Wow.
Yep,
All right.
I am not. I think that's part of the reason I love doing this research so much is because then Sam sits and we have these long conversations about history that, I've got plenty of blanks to fill in.
Sam's fairly
He's
well-read.
he's very well read and he's obsessed with history. He has a degree in history and I just, I have a degree in cryptids history.
Creative writing.
And creative writing. Political science, but I don't know
Is
about
that what it is?
both. But
Wow.
I don't know about being elected as having a president and vice president from the same state. I am going to fall asleep reading that tonight, I can promise you. Anyhow, people got a little bit pissed off, especially when he was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis so intimately. Some of the other members of the cabinet felt like, okay, this is not a role that should be played by this guy who is certainly not elected and shouldn't have this much power. But there are a lot of reports from behind those closed doors from those days and those situations that he has certainly played a role in things going differently than they could have.
Okay.
There's even stories about at the beginning of the Cuban Missile Crisis, him feeling pretty pushy for doing something militarily, something that could have ended pretty horribly. And over the course of those 13 days, apparently he became much more convinced in the ability to handle things through an embargo or, some similar restrained manner, which I am personally fairly thankful for. I'm not sure I'd be here. Don't know about you.
Wait, why?
Well, I mean, if the Cuban Missile Crisis had gone sideways, none of us might be here.
Well, my family, going way back, had bomb shelters, of course.
Yeah, mine didn't.
Very paranoid.
Yeah, mine's really paranoid, but just not a lot of, I think maybe we just have a lot of anxiety, but it's not channeled towards the construction of a bomb shelter.
I think I pushed back. My family, for the most part, very conspiratorial.
Really?
One of my aunts and uncles even claimed that my dad is vaccine injured. So.
Oh, that kind.
Really cool folks.
I really like to draw these lines in the middle of conspiracies, the good ones and the bad ones.
Sure. Yeah, so I in response to that, am I guess the way I am. I believe everyone at their word.
You know what just popped into my head that I haven't thought of in probably 10 years?
What's that?
Remember that Eminem song?
Without Me?
I don't know. It's like I am whatever you say I am.
No, I don't think that was him.
Oh,
What
it was.
What are you looking for? Candy? You taking a little break?
I just need a couple candies in my mouth. I just really need some candies. I'm sorry.
Just play some hold music while you get some candy. Are you doing all right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. What kind of candy is that? How's she doing so far, everybody?
Call 1-833-374-4489 now to share your paranormal encounters and real-life nightmares, or to talk horror with the hosts.
Now people are going to call in live.
No, the live version says
The Frightday phone lines are now open.
And this one does not.
Call 1-833.
Yeah, so one just tells you to call. Yeah.
That made me confused.
Well, one is saying the phone lines are open now, and one does not.
Oh, okay.
Great. Nice little intermission.
Thanks, everybody. Perhaps one of the most endearing parts of speech that I heard from Bobby Kennedy in my research so far is in that same Meet the Press morning interview earlier in 1968. Must have been sometime in February, maybe very beginning of March. He's talking about the Vietnam War because that's the big pressure point. Everybody's saying, you should run because we have to get out of the war and this is important. And he basically said he didn't want to make it a fight between he and LBJ because everybody just wants to talk about the personalities involved, and that's not what this is about. And then later in the conversation, without even being pushed or like accused or put in a corner, he said, I contributed to decisions that got us into this war and to some degree kept us in this war.
So he's partially responsible.
And I feel responsible
because
that was a mistake. And I'm just like, what?
Wait.
What?
Who says?
And again, I realize this
responsibility.
is such a small portion of who this human was, and I'm sure that he did fucking horrible things that I don't know about. But I'm just saying from the pure standpoint of like a politician who can, without being backed into a corner, admit fault and at least have a pretty freaking good argument for wanting to try to make things better that he had a role in screwing up. It's pretty good. Pretty
Kind of revolutionary.
I had to listen to it 3 times before I really understood it because those combination of words don't really even make sense in our current vocabulary. We'll just skip the whole part over the coming years where his brother was assassinated.
Of course.
Because we've heard a lot about that.
Yeah, we talked about it for about 4 or 5 hours. Yeah.
We did. Go back and listen. But the fallout from that was huge.
Was he sad or something?
What's interesting is in the immediate aftermath, so the day after, the weeks after, where the rest of the family was just a fucking mess, he really held it together. And I think probably
Was
that
he the
role.
oldest brother?
Was he the oldest surviving one at that point?
At that point, right?
He might have been the oldest living one at that point, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a good mortality rate among the Kennedy children.
Yeah, Kennedy curse, of course.
Yeah. I mean, one of the sisters, they locked up in a sanitarium somewhere and basically just never let her out. She was there with Arthur Miller's daughter, I guess, or whatever. Fucking awful human beings that did awful things to their children. Fucking assholes.
Didn't Arthur Miller date Marilyn Monroe?
Married.
That's right.
Also, on one of his campaign stops in San Francisco 2 days before the assassination, RFK and his wife went and had a lunch event at Joe DiMaggio's restaurant. Very confusing.
Yeah, everyone's connected. But they were big time celebs back then.
They were. It's true.
And also, apparently, RFK, when he received the news, his body, quote, contorted with grief. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then he stood upright,
Pulled his shit together.
Yeah.
But
Good for him.
as soon as the cameras were off, basically in the next, week and a half, 2 weeks, he gave the speeches, he held everybody together, and then he just collapsed. Once essentially he could, and was super depressed. It was very, very difficult for a long time. When he finally came out of it, his decision was to resign as Attorney General. He stayed on long enough with LBJ in his presidency to make sure the Civil Rights Act was passed, which I thought was pretty badass. Attorney General, legal, all that. Yeah, man, that's fucking depressing. God. And then he left to run for senator. He became Senator Bobby Kennedy for New York.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I'm just hearing you chew, and it's starting to make me anxious.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's just have a quick little candy break, and then...
Okay. I'll take a swig of wine, and then we'll be good.
Okay.
Okay.
I shouldn't be eating candy. We're about to be on screen for.
It's really good. Oh my
8
God.
hours.
No, I'm not. No.
You're not gonna let me do that.
I'm not tolerating that. It's Joe's fault. I agree. It's Joe's fault.
It's all Joe DiMaggio's fault.
Oh, I was talking about Joe Kennedy.
Okay,
Senior.
him too. Just like Joe Jackson too.
Could be
Father
his
of
fault
Michael
too.
Jackson.
Fuck.
Joe's
Man.
a bad name. All right, we have a little edit point. Nice.
Thank you, B. Apologies.
No, you're fine.
So, obviously, Kennedy had the weight of his family name behind him. And he and his family had lived in the suburbs of New York since, forever. So, he grew up understanding at least a little bit about what went on around there. And at this point, especially after being heavily involved in the civil rights movement, again, I am telling very much a
Sympathetic story.
sympathetic story. And
Yeah.
and I do want to, by no means am I trying to say that this is the full both sides of who our RFK was as a human being, mostly because I'm just trying to get us up to the point of his assassination. Really, to me, the questions surrounding his assassination don't lie very much in whether or not he was worthy of people's adoration,
Sure.
but rather whether it was a particularly mentally unwell man or the result of really not too fabulous people that he pissed off along the way. Neither of those things really have to do with whether he was a great feller or not. I just was enjoying the nostalgia of pretending there was a better time where politicians admitted their faults and you could actually get really excited about somebody trying to make the world better. Oh, yeah, he did a ton of stuff with apartheid, too.
Really?
Fuck. Yeah, like while he was working to campaign and then working as a senator for New York, he gave this incredible speech in South Africa regarding apartheid. He did work in Eastern Europe, and then locally supported a lot of legislation trying to get private businesses to come into communities that had previously been ignored and kind of treated as, nobody wants to go there. He improved lives for a lot of people there. I'm sure that this was not completely perfect. There are always going to be issues. Overall, it was a bit inspirational to see what he was trying to do at the very least. Fun side note here. So we're creeping up. 64, he becomes the senator. He's serving as senator. We get to 1967. And Byron, in July of 1967, so we are now less than a year from Bobby's impending doom. We're in Northern California, at this particularly thick grove of trees with a giant owl.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Moloch? Are we serious?
Yep, we are.
You know how I feel about those folks.
I know. Well, you know what's fascinating? There doesn't appear to be much connection between the Kennedys, at least of this generation. I haven't looked at the younger ones, but between no, I don't want to see him. Between the Kennedys and Bohemian Grove, which I thought was kind of weird. Maybe somebody's just wiped that, but I couldn't find anything. But who was there? Well, I'll tell you. Governor Reagan and Richard Milhouse Nixon.
It was a big year for...
Well, it was a big year. And there was a discussion there where apparently it was decided that Nixon would be the next president.
They settled it. Yeah.
They settled it.
And then they peed.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they do, run around.
There's even
naked.
some really horrific, very poor choice of words quote from Richard Nixon about how he viewed Bohemian Grove.
Really?
Yeah. Particular slurs about homosexuality.
Oh, well, yeah, he said that a lot.
Yeah, he really liked that word.
Yeah.
That said, he certainly seemed to be fine with capturing any power that came from frequenting it. And on this year, it was a specific agreement between he and Reagan that the only way Reagan would step in to run, because Reagan was kind of itching to run. He thought this was his time. And Milhouse said, no, it's my time. Fuck you. And Reagan, basically with all of the other group, they came to the conclusion that Reagan would only step in if Nixon faltered. So it was on Nixon to run a heavy campaign.
Yeah, I just read the quote from Nixon.
Yeah, pretty gross.
Yeah.
Told you. It's exactly what you would imagine,
Exactly.
right?
No one needs to hear
Yep.
that.
So those of you out there with wandering conspiratorial questioning minds might wonder, well, geez, I wonder if there might have been some other decisions made in that Bohemian Grove about certain fates that could befall other leaders that year. Like,
I don't know. They never
know.
They never plotted assassinations, did they? I don't think that they were like violent.
Interesting. I don't know.
I mean, their notice of trademark infringement that they sent me wasn't particularly.
I still think it's time to push back.
I mean,
I think the time has come to
it's
flex.
been like 3 years.
I
at
think
this
we need to
point.
see how much they mean it. That's what I want to see.
Listen, Richard P. Doyle Jr.
Yeah,
calling-
Dick.
I'm calling you out. No way. He just represents.
Hey,
Bohemian
Dick.
Grove. He's fine.
I bet he's dead now. They've got to kill their lawyers like what, every 24 months, I would guess?
Is it wrong? Can
Get a new
Can
slate?
I actually not say his name?
Why would you not be able to say his name?
I don't know. This email,
He sent you a cease and desist
including
letter.
attachments, is covered by the Electronic Communications Act of.
Yeah, well, we're too
Confidential.
fucking dumb. We don't know what that means.
Yeah, listen, I will probably beep that out.
No, leave it in.
You think?
Leave it in. Leave it in.
Oh, God. All right.
I mean, I don't think that it's weird to imagine that they would have been talking about getting rid of people like Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Also, before somebody calls me on it, I do need to at least do a miniature side quest and clarify that when Kennedy was Attorney General of the United States, he did sign the approval to have MLK's phone tapped by the FBI. So I don't want to make it sound like he was just... If that isn't exactly what Dick Doyle is supposed to look like...
I can't show anyone.
Why? It's on the fucking internet. Everybody, go look up Dick Doyle.
Why? I don't want to get arrested.
Go look up Dick Doyle.
I don't want to
Dick
get...
Doyle Jr.
Listen,
Dick Doyle.
I don't want to cause any trouble.
You know what? I bet Dick Doyle's real name is Joe.
That's enough. His name is Rich Doyle.
Dick.
Okay.
You know Dick is what...
Yeah,
Dick.
yeah, I know.
Dick.
I'm familiar. Tricky Dick. We got it.
Yeah.
Now I have to go to jail. Thanks a lot, Kelly.
Yeah. Yeah. Now's as good a time as any. I was listening to a bunch of stuff about LBJ, and, you know, Hoover had some crazy power. Do you know he went through 8 different presidencies and worked way past when he was supposed to? There's supposed to be mandatory retirement, and he somehow got like a special exemption and just fucking kept working. And for whatever reason, RFK signed the okay, yeah, go ahead and tap MLK's phones. I don't know if you're listening to the podcast Snafu, but some of that information came out when these people, I believe it was in 61, broke into the FBI headquarters building and got a ton of the records out, which showed some of these completely illegal wiretaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which we did talk a little bit in our COINTELPRO episode.
Yeah.
At the Frightday Society.org.
Yeah. But I don't want to RFK to get away without any culpability, or he definitely signed
His
that
phone number.
okay.
Should I give him a call?
Doyle?
Yeah.
Dick Doyle? Is it his cell?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Let's fucking call him right now. Can we call him live?
That seems really illegal.
I'll talk to Dick.
That seems very illegal. Let's not do it. We're fine.
We might have to bleep that, but as long as we get his permission up front.
Hey, this
Anyhow.
is being recorded for a podcast.
Hey!
Wait, what?
Hey, knowledge of recording.
No. Okay. All right. No, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go.
Oh, a tab went in there.
Oh, no. You're out of wine.
By the time 1968 rolls around, Kennedy is very anti-war, anti-communism.
Okay.
Or at
yeah,
least-
that's an interesting stance. I
Yeah,
guess.
I guess he was more anti fear-mongering regarding communism. I think he still was pretty against the idea of communism, but was anti the crazy fear-mongering. And when he wasn't sure what he was going to do, it was Eugene McCarthy. Again, very different. Because
McCarthy.
Eugene McCarthy, this feller from Minnesota, was actually anti-war, very liberal, completely different from what the other McCarthy, who was leading the Red Scare. Crazy scramble, obviously. Kennedy was actually in Indianapolis when he heard about MLK's assassination, and he got up and broke it to the crowd, and spoke, obviously, like impromptu, about the loss and how awful it was, and basically his hope that everybody can come together and not be a bunch of dicks. It's a
Could you
beautiful
lower those signs, please?
Yeah.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those...
Pretty sad.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Really beautiful speech. You guys should go listen to the whole thing, though. Very impressive that somebody could come up with that on, on such horrible short notice, and I'm sure he was pretty upset. If he was 1/10 the person that I am imagining him to be, I can't imagine how awful it must have felt to know, oh wow, I fucking okayed his wiretap, and knowing the way that things work in this country, he had seen Marilyn die. He had to fucking know that there was something weird up there. He knew someone was involved in his brother's death, and in fact,
is that true? He had a belief that his personal thoughts were. Yeah,
but what's strange is the movie JFK, which surrounds Jim Garrison's investigation of the Kennedy assassination a few years after the assassination. He was actually very opposed to Garrison's investigation, primarily because he was concerned with what might come up regarding our involvement in Cuba.
Okay.
And our interference and
the Bay of Pigs.
Wildly failed attempts to try and kill Castro.
Yeah. Which we talked about last week.
Including information that he actually knew who Oswald was well before he killed his brother, or didn't kill his brother, because he had been involved in a lot of the secret goings on with Cuba, Castro, CIA shenanigans. And so in order to preserve his reputation, his brother's reputation, etc., he was worried that Garrison was good enough that all that shit was going to come out.
And it would soil the reputation.
Yeah, and so he was very anti. He didn't want it investigated. And, would in public say, nope, I buy what the Warren Commission said. And, even behind half open doors would say, no, there's no fucking way that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does sound like eventually he became a little bit more skeptical over time, publicly. Well, I guess he died very soon after, never mind. So
yeah.
At the end of that, and that's maybe the reason why.
But very much, perhaps, we'll talk about all sorts of theories like that down the road. Yeah, and even in the days leading up to RFK's assassination, Byron, which I think we'll probably go into on the next installment a little bit more carefully, because there were some very interesting things that happened in those days. His wife was with him. They had 2 kids with them on this part of the campaign push, and he had a lot of hope for what was to come. And I think he truly believed that if he could get in, he understood the way that the office worked enough. He was pretty confident he could get us out of Vietnam quickly. Now, who knows? It could have turned out like us getting out of Afghanistan and could have looked like dog shit. I don't know.
Sure.
But
Or when we tried to get out of, Iraq and just drone striked a bunch of people. Well, the coolest president that
Yes.
we've ever had,
Yes.
kind of pulled the wool. I love him. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
I know. I mean, that's the thing. I'm really working on both adjusting to that myself and also trying to teach my daughters that nobody is going to be without shit.
Well, you're the president. Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much you admire somebody. We have this talk about Lin-Manuel Miranda in our house a lot.
Did he do something wrong?
No, I mean, not that I know of. I'm sure he did.
Sure.
But like trying to talk to Creature about she's obsessed with him and his amazing artistic talents. I'm like,
He's a guy.
it doesn't change the fact that the stuff he's created is really cool. I promise he's screwed up. I promise he's done shit. Hopefully it's not horrific. Hopefully it doesn't cross the 5149 line.
Sure.
But there's no such thing as a person out there who is without blame.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Except for Jesus.
Yep. The bowler. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
From Big Lebowski. Different
Really
guy.
good one.
Very good bowler.
Doesn't seem like we could get much further away from Camelot, Byron, than all the way across the world into Jerusalem, Palestine.
How's that going?
Well, you see, this is where Bashara Sirhan was born.
Wow. Okay.
On March 19th, 1944. Byron, how much historical knowledge do you have of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
I don't know, not anything that...
Okay, so we're going to spend the next 20 minutes doing a pro-con between the two sides. I'm just kidding. No, we're definitely not doing that.
I don't think that's a good idea.
I don't think either of us are... I mean, I'll speak for myself and not speak for you.
I've heard-
I am nowhere near knowledgeable enough.
Yeah, I've heard arguments from both perspectives, and it's just really difficult to navigate. Yeah.
I think like so many things, there's way too much information for somebody in my position to ever come to a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah.
And therefore, we're going to look at this through the eyes of a Sirhan. And you see, the Sirhan, one of the things that isn't necessarily commonly known about him, yes, he was born in Jerusalem, Palestine. Yes, his skin color is dark, though contrary to some of the immediate reports you will hear in one of our installments, he's referred to as a Mexican kid.
Well,
Nope.
I mean, you got to remember, this is 1968.
It's 1968, where nobody in America could tell the difference between a person from the Middle East and a person from South America,
Yeah, I mean, sounds about right.
or a person from Mexico versus, it was just like, oh, he's not white. He's a Mexican kid.
Probably got to be a Mexican kid.
Like fucking, do you know one of the students I work with told me, did I tell you, they celebrate Cinco de Mayo at their boarding school? Like as a serious cultural, like we're going to celebrate Mexican culture and we're going to celebrate. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe not at a boarding school, something you celebrate.
What? Well, not even because of the alcohol thing, because it's not a fucking real holiday in Mexico.
Well, yeah.
It's a
No,
dumbass
that's what I meant.
American white trash holiday. It's not a real anyhow.
Celebrate Mexico's victory over the
Sorry, Bun
second
Buns.
French Empire in the Battle of
Really?
Puebla in 1862, which
Yeah,
is
nobody-
I was gonna say, quiz someone on what that is.
Yeah, it's like a running joke about, again, how dumb Americans are. Constantly. We just always give people ammunition. Well, he was born in the middle of a lot of terrible things going on there. Little known fact, if you're just doing the overview of him, he was actually Christian, very strongly Christian. He was not religiously aligned with the Palestinian state.
Mm-hmm.
He was much more religiously aligned with Israel. However, he did suffer from both parties and what was going on surrounding his childhood there. A couple terrible stories. I believe it was one of his brothers was killed. He also, one day, as the tale goes, was carrying in a bucket of water before looking to see what was in it, and then discovered there was a severed hand in the water he had carried in for his family.
Oh, man.
pretty awful.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to argue that. It was clearly a very terrible place. His father was apparently fairly rigid / abusive.
They called it rigid back then.
Well, the problem is trying to find primary source information on this is a little bit challenging.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
it really seems to align with whoever's narrative you're reading.
And a lot of people have very specific ideas of
Right.
Sirhan lineage.
Right. And, some people are trying to create a narrative where clearly all of these dominoes fell into place to get to our jump to conclusions, Matt spot of this is why he would ultimately decide to assassinate a Kennedy.
Because it only makes sense.
Because it only makes sense. In reality, I think like everything, it was complicated. He did, young Sirhan almost certainly was abused by his father. Whether it was categorically different from what was going on around him, I don't know. At a certain point, his father came to America and then sent for his family. The family moved over there. But then the father decided he did not like living in America and moved back.
And left his family?
Left his family. Other reports say that the mother actually was fleeing the father and came on her own. It seems to me that just from an immigration standpoint, I actually think the father did come over first and then
it was
sent for the
refugee
family.
status, though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. A high school teacher of Sirhan's described him as having a language handicap, which I don't know, maybe came from being born and raised with a different
country.
language,
Yeah.
but that he was cooperative and well-mannered.
Okay.
This is one of those areas where I would love nothing more than to spend, 2 weeks going and researching the documents that we can find that are attached to his actual father. Really, the closest look into his dad that I got was an article written by a man, I think he was working for the New York Times, in Israel when our Bobby was assassinated. And it was his job to go tell Sirhan's father, whose name was Bashara Sirhan, that his son had killed Robert Kennedy. And even reading the reaction of this man, it's hard to tell whether he was reacting out of fear for himself because he's got this, I'm sure what looked like a pretty important American man sitting in his kitchen talking about what his son had just done to a famous American politician.
The most famous.
Right.
I mean, potentially of two, I guess.
Yeah, well, and the other one was already dead, so...
Yeah. Well, but, I mean, the Republican challengers.
No, I mean, nobody really...
Who was he running against? Who was
Nixon.
Well, yeah.
Nobody knew Nixon yet. I mean, Nixon was like, meh.
Wasn't he a senator?
He wasn't a fucking Kennedy.
Okay.
Wasn't a fucking Kennedy. But it was almost as though he was scared that he was going to be implicated, or he was trying to cover up whatever his actual relationship was with Sirhan.
Yeah.
But he definitely talked about, he was the best boy.
The smartest with the best grades.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then he said it was the blackest day of his life. He was 52 when this happened. And he talked about, we studied the Bible together. And it's just, it's really hard, especially between the time difference of, when this was written in the 60s and the cultural difference, to assess anything more than it seemed like he was wildly uncomfortable.
I think that this is something that needs to be studied more. Is like, you see far too often in the United States these days, journalists ambushing parents of school shooters.
I mean, if they were the ones who...
Well, like Ethan Crumbley's parents who provided the weapons.
But that's a pretty extreme situation.
I think it's going to be more and more common because kids usually do get get guns from their parents, or at least have access because of their parents. And it seems like that is less tolerated these days, rightfully so.
Yeah. So according to the journalist, this is what Bashara said. Sirhan was shocked This we're talking about the father, okay?
Yeah.
First incredulous and then angry, Sirhan Jr. had been the best of boys, he said. Then his face darkened, and he said if he did it, he should hang.
If he did this dirty thing, is the quote.
Yep.
Which I kind of think, that's not minimizing, of course, but...
Yeah. And then, again, there are some stories that when Sirhan was young, his father was actually really kind, and then he turned and started drinking and became violent when he lost his job and blamed it on Israelis that he lost his job. But who the hell knows? Could be. Also could be totally not an accurate picture, or again, just a snapshot that isn't giving us enough of context to understand what was really going on. It's easier, still not crystal clear, but it's easier to tell about Sirhan once he arrived in the States, just hearing the stories about him. Once he graduated and started Pasadena City College, graduated high school, started Pasadena City College in the fall of 1963. So keep in mind, he is starting college at the time that Robert Kennedy is just moving through his brother's assassination.
Yeah.
Okay. And as he gets through this first year of college, it's as Bobby starts to process and get through this grief and decides he's going to run for senator. Meanwhile, Sirhan's going through his own horrific trauma. Okay. Another kind of strange parallel between these two men. He lost his sister in March of 1965. He actually had basically only half enrolled in school and was coming home immediately after classes every day to care for his sister because she had leukemia.
Oh, man.
And 3 months after she died, he dropped out of college, apparently really, really distraught because of it. So that fall, again, kind of similar to this timeline of Bobby, where it was about 4 or 5 months after his sister had passed. He had been really depressed. He kind of supposedly worked through it to the point that he was ready to start something new, to start a new chapter in his life. And this is when he began working at the Santa Anita racetrack, Byron, where he was training to be a jockey.
Okay. Like our good friend Sam.
Like our good friend husband, Sam.
Ah.
Yep. The foreman at the ranch, shortly after the assassination, said the following. Sirhan was a poor horse rider.
Oh, no.
And was constantly being thrown or falling from horses that he was working. Well, not much of a surprise that he quit this job after a few months and began working at...
Physically, though, he should have been good at this. He's like
he
5'5",
was
120.
He was perfect.
Small man.
Size for a jockey.
Yeah.
Yeah. He quit in March of 1966 and began working for another farm nearby. This is where an incident would happen that really did change things significantly for him. He suffered an injury. He was thrown from a horse.
Oh, no.
It was a foggy morning in September, and this was September of 1966. So, we are 20 months before he kills Kennedy. He was thrown against a metal post where he lay crumpled, crying, and bleeding. Eventually, he got a $2,000 settlement over the incident. But
$2,000, huh? All
yeah.
Right. Well, a settlement because a horse threw him?
Yeah.
I don't see.
Yeah. And again, we've got this snapshot of, okay, he gets thrown from a horse, and then other things in his life start to shift a little bit. And one angle that you hear things from are, he must have gotten a head injury, and this is what made him loopy, and this is why he went and shot Kennedy eventually.
Yeah, I mean,
okay?
a lot of serial killers, that's one of the, what is it, the triad, dark triad is head injuries.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's the other?
Childhood bedwetting.
Oh.
I think.
Killing animals.
Killing animals is one, and I'm trying to think, for some reason, it wouldn't be a triad if there was more than 3, but like pyromania is one, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember.
Fuck. It sounds like a quadratic.
Square.
A quadrilateral. Yeah. So, Byron, there's a lot more that happened once Sirhan started being around horses and being around jockeys and training to become a
That's
jockey.
the McDonald triad. I'm sorry, it's different than the dark triad.
Oh. And as much as I would really like to just refer to the episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Charlie hangs out with the jockey for an afternoon while his buddies are hanging out at a country club and trying to learn how to be fancy, I think you should all go watch that episode because it's a great reference for this episode. You're going to have to wait until the next installment in order to hear a little bit more about exactly what befell Sirhan when he tried to start a new leaf in his life, the same way that Turned Over a New Leaf. Is it Turned Over a New Leaf or a leaf?
Leaf.
Okay, I thought it
That's
was
the
two.
other side of
Nip
the
it in the
leaf.
bud, not the butt.
No,
Yeah, I mean,
not the butt. The butt.
no, yeah, bud.
Which is what
D.
you said.
Bud, not butt.
Yep.
Supposedly, not supposably.
Yep.
Yep. Just questioning some things,
Just-
making sure.
Great.
Trying not to make assumptions. So we're going to talk about that next because there's a lot that happens there, and then that's going to lead us directly to these few days before the assassination. Byron, we're in for a lot in these coming episodes. We've got some surprisingly crystal clear witness testimony, okay, which we all know serves as a type of evidence, though we have to be cautious about it because witnesses are notoriously unreliable, okay? We have physical evidence, okay? Bullets, bullet holes, bullet wounds,
Probably
bodies,
casings.
striations,
Yeah.
all sorts of things. I've been consulting with a weapons authenticity expert on this.
I wonder who that could be.
Yeah. And then we also have pretty incredible audio, video, and photo that we're going to comb through. All right. So we're in for a lot here.
It's a good plug for the video version of the podcast, too. YouTube.com/Frightday if you haven't subscribed yet.
Yeah, because next episode is going to be pretty robust. You can certainly get through it without watching it, but it's going to add another layer if you're able to get eyes on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Though we will certainly leave the links in the show notes.
I might forget.
Byron,
Sometimes I forget stuff.
Byron, don't be mean.
Might as well go to youtube.com/Frightday now and subscribe.
Byron, that's so mean.
It's not that mean.
Okay. And then Byron, one of the things I want you to just put a pin in, and on those nights when you're like dozing off and your phone's by your bed, even though it shouldn't be, you're just scrolling.
Yeah.
Do a little bit of research and questioning your assumptions. See what you can find out about hypnotism as
Don't
like
believe in
any
it.
proven science.
Don't believe in it.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks so much for the report,
Assumptions,
Kelly.
Byron.
Okay, I'll try to start challenging my assumptions.
Very good. Very, very good.
Appreciate your report, Kelly. It's been a while.
Thanks. I'm very, very excited, you guys. This RFK thing is fascinating. And even if you hate everything I just said about him and you really fucking hate RFK and you don't want to deal with the idea that this is going to be like a martyrdom thing, it really doesn't matter. I mean, whether he was awful or whether he was wonderful, there's still so much involved in the story you think you know, not being the true story. I promise.
Wow. Well, something that we haven't done in a while. We got a
candy?
review. Well, yeah, feel free to
Oh.
have a bite of that.
Oh, man.
We got a review of the podcast
Fun buzz.
that I haven't read in a while.
Oh, boy. I bet this one's going to be mean. I can tell by your
I
lead-in.
don't think so.
Somebody going to be mean to me?
So you, it's important that you go to, give us stars, ratings, reviews on iTunes.
So helpful.
And Spotify. Spotify is really easy. Just give us stars there. Always appreciated.
Do you guys know how many bad podcasts with people who aren't very nice
Yeah.
get reviews and get pushed up lists?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're at least decent.
We're pretty bad at self-promotion.
And I try to be really nice.
We're not very bad at this.
Hate the green ones. I fucking hate the green ones.
I don't even know what flavor those are.
Probably watermelon.
I don't think they are. Not having an episode of this podcast. This came out during our hiatus in June.
Oh.
It's from Jason 84848484 from Great Britain. Yeah. Not having an episode of this to listen at work makes me furious. 5 stars. And I bring this up because I initially found this podcast while searching iTunes for content about Zach Bagans. I did this because that's a series that we did a while back.
Do you think he was a fan or not a fan?
I did this because he fascinates and infuriates me in equal
I'm with
measure.
You.
Yeah,
sir. Oh, I agree.
I realized that searching for podcasts to try to reaffirm my opinion on a celebrity that I have never met and never will meet is odd, but that's besides the point. That is also why we make those episodes.
100%.
The Zach Bag episodes were enough to get me hooked, however, and Frightday is now easily my number one go-to podcast. The kind of podcast that makes you consider attempting the mind-numbingly difficult task of moving your family from the UK to the US so you can buy a house in Montana on the off chance that you'll run into one of the creators at a coffee shop, play it cool by nonchalantly saying hi while pretending you don't know who they are. I'm so sorry. I don't go to coffee shops, so that's going to be
I love that. I will.
Stretch.
I will.
I, like many reviewers here, feel an affinity to the hosts. I saw someone describe it as being like a podcast hosted by your friends, but they don't know your friends. That's a perfect description. My wife despises horror films as she is a massive scaredy cat, so I have to secretly watch horror around 5 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday. That, however, is her only flaw. Oh, that's pretty sweet.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's a good flaw.
Yeah.
She should still listen to the show, though, because most of it isn't horror.
For the most part.
Or at least isn't horror movie requisite.
It should be. Listening to the show makes me feel like I have someone to share.
Does it say where he lives in England?
No, I don't think I would say that on the air either. The horror culture.
A lot of people there.
Someone to share the horror culture with, and that makes me feel lovely. Byron's insane work rate, humor, with a U, of course, because he's from the UK, and easygoing nature make this a joy to listen to. Kelly would drive me to insanity if I ever met her.
Fair,
but
that's
I'm
all right.
sure that I'd be laughing all the way to the padded room at the Puzzle Factory. She's lovable, really.
I swear, you just keep telling yourself that, James.
Keep up the great work.
Oh, that's very kind.
Yeah,
that means
nice
a lot to me.
So yeah, rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify.
makes
You don't
me-
have to be that nice.
Yeah, you could be, like if you could give us 5 stars and then tell me all the things I do wrong too.
Sure. I mean, that was kind of what was said, right?
I mean, you said I drive him crazy, but didn't really give me any points for improvement, but that's okay.
That is true.
You guys are just great. And
Appreciate you.
I was literally so excited prepping for this. I can't wait to go back to my string board.
Yeah. That's the program for this week. Follow us on social media at Frightday on Twitter and Instagram. Join us on Discord, discord.frightday.com. Hang out with us there. Email us, contact@frightday.com. You have the phone number in your phone at this point. I don't need to tell you. It's 1-833-374-4489, 1-833-FRIGHT9.
Night focaccia.
Call us whenever.
God damn it, I really wish I had some focaccia bread.
And wouldn't that be nice?
So fucking good. I'm really hungry. I ate too much sugar.
If you want more, Behind the Screams continues at thefrightdaysociety.org right now, where this week we'll be looking into Kelly's slasher VP pick. Until next Frightday, I'm Byron.
I'm Kelly.
I think it's safe to say, don't be a Kennedy. It's not worth it.
No, it's really not. It's why I have empathy for the new one.
And stay scared.
Bye. Did you know you can get brainworms from...
You've been listening to an Audio Wool original, produced by Byron McKoy. Theme music is provided by Yawns. For more programs like this, visit audiowool.co.